On today's show, the Hawks hosted the Nets on Sunday afternoon. Did they play well? No. Did they win? Yes. We'll get into all what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2175 of the Locked On Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening from State Farm Arena in late February here. In today's podcast, brought by the folks at FanDuel. Use Profit Boost right now in an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game now with the folks at FanDuel. And today, we'll be diving into what became a win for the Hawks, 115-104. As a PSA, I am recording from the arena. There's actually an event happening, so if there's any background noise, my apologies, but I'm still displaced for a couple more days, hopefully only from the apartment flood that transpired, so forgive me, but I'm on the scene here on a Sunday and will be delivering what was an interesting game to talk about in some respects. On one hand, a nice bounce-back win for the Hawks after a pretty desolatory loss on Friday to Miami that talked about on this podcast, and by the way, please subscribe and listen to previous episodes of the show, but if you didn't watch this game and you just saw the final score between the Hawks and the Nets on Sunday, you might be surprised how the game actually went. Because on one hand, the Hawks were favored, according to our friends at FanDuel, by 9.5 points in this game. That was their biggest point spread as a favorite since January 7th when they were at home against New Orleans at that point. And they ended up covering the spread at the end. But they were right in line, obviously. If this game was probably projected to be about exactly what happened at the end of the game. But it was not that way for most of the game. The Hawks did change their lineup to start the game, which I'll talk about later in the show in a lot more detail. They played very poorly for the first 3.25 quarters, almost 3.5 quarters of the game. They were down by 11. Yes, down by 11 with 8 minutes to go as a 9.5 point favorite. And from there, they just were absolutely dominant. It was 24-2 in favor of the Hawks to close the game over the last 8 minutes to win by 11. And that was just a crazy flipping of the switch in some respects. It's never one team at that point. Like, you can dominate a game, but in the NBA, when these guys are all pros, it's not just one team. Like, the Nets did play very poorly at the end, and the Hawks played really well at the end. And that led to the game totally flipping and the Hawks getting a win they just needed to get, honestly, because it would have been a very bad loss. Full stop, a very bad loss for a team that's not like all in right now, as the Hawks are trying to look to the future. That was the deadline message from the front office. But they're still trying to make the playoffs, and it would have been a bad result to lose this game at home to the Nets. And they avoided that, if nothing else. So as far as how this game unfolded and what the Hawks did or didn't do, I thought offensively they were largely solid in this one. They had about a 120 offensive rating in the game. Even with that big closing kick that happened where they dominated at the end, that was mostly the defense just waking up. There was some better offense late, especially from Jalen Johnson, but throughout the game, they did score fairly consistently. The Nets are a bottom 5 defensive team. That was part of this, but the Hawks scored at least 26 points in all 4 quarters. Like, they were effective enough on offense. It wasn't great by any means. They also didn't play all that well. They got decent looks. Jalen Johnson, of course, the Hawks' best player by a wide margin right now. You look up at the end of the game and he has 26 and 12. He actually was very bad, I thought, for about 3 quarters. And at the end, he was awesome. And that was a big part of the swing that actually happened towards the Hawks. Overall, they shot the ball fairly well, 39% from 3, 54% on 2s. They had some pretty good rebounding on the offensive glass. They had 28 assists. They made their free throws. They had good balance with 8 guys with 7 points or more. The one stat-based hiccup was 17 turnovers. That's not what you want, obviously. That would get you beat a lot of the time. The Hawks' numbers when they turn the ball over a lot this year are not very good, but they did do the other things well enough to keep things relatively afloat. Now, if the Hawks played the same way against a better opponent who was not a bottom 5 defensive team, it might not have been this as productive. But if the Hawks had lost this game, I would have come on in the podcast and said, hey, the offense was actually not the problem in this game, and it wasn't. It was not a huge part of the solution, but it also wasn't bad. Defensively, it really was quite poor for about 40 full minutes in this one. I'll get into the crunch time stuff a little bit later on when we talk about the game flow, but the Hawks had a defensive rating that was well above 120 after the first 40 minutes. And against a team in the Nets that's bad, full stop, you cannot be giving up 1.2 points per possession or more for 40 minutes of game time. That's very poor defense. To their credit, they did turn the water off from that point on. I thought Dyson Daniels in particular was ridiculously good in the last 8 minutes, just 3 steals late, just flying around, making plays. He's usually not the problem regardless defensively, but it was a collective improvement at the end, but still not very good in this one. They ended up with a pretty good defensive mark for the entire game by just the pure numbers. But I have to say, if you didn't watch the game, you have to trust me on this. They were not good defensively for a large portion of this one, even if the numbers don't say that. And even at the end, they got some help from the Nets. Like the Nets missed a lot of shots, and their rookies, Demon and Traore, were just like absolutely dreadful at the end of the game. And that's part of why you're playing a bad team, and that matters. But the Hawks did play well late, and that does not excuse what happened before that. Like the one thing they actually did do pretty well the whole game was defensive rebound. That's usually a bigger problem for this Hawks team than it was in this game. But the first half defense at the rim was just dreadful and improved after that. You would hope to see the Hawks win the possession game on the margins by a lot against the Nets, and that didn't really happen. They broke even or so on that, which isn't like a disaster, but like you probably should just win the under the radar stuff against this Nets team. Look, I'll just lay it out for you this way. If the Hawks played the way they did today, normally, they would have lost to at least 22 teams in the league, maybe 25, 26, 27 teams in the league. Like they won this game in part because the Nets are very bad. And they still almost lost this game. Like you're down 11 with 8 minutes to go. I don't care who you're playing in the NBA. You are the underdog. I actually looked at FanDuel at that point in time. The Hawks were the underdog in that game, down 11 with 8 minutes to go. And they won it. Again, kudos to them. That matters. But they just really did not play well overall. And the reaction is certainly different, and with good reason. When you find a way to win, that's the name of the game sometimes. When you're not playing well, you got to kind of figure it out and get it over the finish line. I often say, probably to the annoyance of my listeners and watchers of this podcast, like nothing is assured in the NBA. Now, did I think the Hawks were going to win this game? Yes, I did. Coming in, I would have said, hey, I'm very confident the Hawks will win today. But I never would have said it's guaranteed. I never would have said must win because these guys are all pros. Every year you see, Hawks or not, teams lose as big favorites and they win as big underdogs. That's just what happens in the NBA. These are all pros. It's not like college when you're like so much better than your opponent. These guys are professional basketball players. With that said, like, man, this is about as ugly as you can play in the NBA while winning. And by the way, Quinn Snyder took forever to come out post-game to the podium. He was relatively upbeat given the standards of what happened. But I would imagine, this is a guess, not a reporting, that the staff was probably not thrilled with the way they played in this game, nor should they be. But so look, I would say just choose your own adventure on reactions. Like I saw a lot of people that were very angry during the game, and I don't blame you at all. If you're a Hawks fan watching that game for the first 40 minutes, it was maddening. There was a lot of shaking of heads on press row. Like we're not rooting in the way that fans are on press row at games, but it's like, what is going on here? They're playing terribly, et cetera, et cetera. I'll just say that they managed to win. So it's more of a lighthearted scolding on how bad they played rather than a full-on meltdown panic. And that would have happened if they lost this game on the outside. I'm not saying the Hawks would have reacted that way, but it would have been a bad loss, to say the least. And they avoided that. So as many have said, a couple months from now, the Sickles will remember this, but a lot of people will be like, hey, they beat the Nets by 11. That was kind of the expected result. I promise you, and on this podcast, I strive to give you the whole picture of how things happened, both good and bad. It wasn't great, but it was a win. And look, this week, the Hawks have these 3 games in a row. I talked about it a little bit on Friday, where they have Brooklyn today, which they won, and they have 2 games with Washington on Tuesday and Thursday at home. I never say that a team should win three in a row. The Hawks need to win 3 in a row, probably in those three. And today, they got it over the finish line at the end. All right, there's plenty more to get to, from starting lineup changes to how this game unfolded when it comes to how they closed it out. Admittedly, in impressive fashion. We'll get into all of that, player evaluations, and more. It's coming up in just 1 minute. Shoot your shot on PrizePicks and receive $50 instantly with lineups when you play your first $5 at PrizePicks. That's right. They're getting $50 at PrizePicks and lineups when you sign up and play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. Every dunk, every diamond, every board are that much more exciting. It's America's #1 app for sports picks. And PrizePicks is really simple to play as well. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if your picks are right, you can cash in at PrizePicks. You choose from basketball and baseball and football, hockey, soccer, golf, tennis, UFC, and so much more. Plus, they features like early payouts and flex play, so you actually have options even while the games are still happening. It's easy to get started at PrizePicks as well. It just takes a minute or two to build your first lineup, and it makes every single possession more fun to watch. There's also a cool social feature. You actually see if you want to what other people are actually saying and playing. Copy lineups with 1 click. It's a cool way to learn and build better picks along the way. And it's available in all 50 states. That's all 50 states. So it's easy for you, just about anybody, to jump into the mix at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to receive $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. The code is LOCKEDONNBA, $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Thank you as always for joining us on today's podcast, making Locked on Hawks your first listen each and every day. If you ever want to go ad-free or get some more perks about the podcast, you can join the Everydayer Club right now, and the place to go is lockedonhawks.supercast.com. And before I dive into the game itself, the Hawks made some news today by changing the starting lineup, which Quinn talked about after the game as well, which I will share some insight from that in a second. If you missed it, McCollum is now starting, at least as of today, and Ricochet came off the bench today. I suspected this might be coming whenever they lost again anytime soon, in part because of conversations behind the scenes, but also because Quinn Snyder kind of went out of his way on Friday to mention that the team's best lineup by the numbers has been the one with McCollum in it, which, by the way, has been true, and that's accurate. But Quinn repeated that again tonight after the game when Kevin Starr asked him about this lineup change. It was a long answer. I played it for you. It's like 3 minutes long. But he ended up praising Zach pretty explicitly, honestly, in a way that was I found encouraging, and said that it was not anything to do with like a lesser belief in Ricochet or anything like that, just leaning on the lineup data. And I think he also noted some extra shot creation with McCollum. Like, it was a reasonable answer, I thought, to the question. And I will actually have put that on my Patreon as well. But basically, it comes down to a few things here. McCollum, Alexander Walker, Daniels, Johnson, and Okongwu has been the closing lineup pretty much every time they've all been available for the entire time that McCollum's been around, which is like 7 weeks at this point in time. And they began today's game with a lineup net rating of like plus 15. They've been awesome with that closing five. And by the way, got even better today because they crushed it at the end of the game with that same group on the floor. Does that mean that same group's going to be awesome all the time? It does not. And the Hawks only have a few 5-man lineups that have a ton of minutes this year because they've had so many injuries. But it's actually crazy. McCollum just got here 7 weeks ago. And that lineup, the closing five, which is now the starting five as of today, is the 4th most used 5-man lineup that the Hawks have. So they don't have a lot of options in that regard. But the number one most used lineup is the starting lineup with Ricochet, and that's actually been good. So people have kind of missed this. The starting lineup with Zach in place of McCollum has a +2 net rating this year. That's not great, but it's better than what the Hawks have been overall. So that's not been the problem area by any means, but they have been their best this season, at least in the post-Trey, post-Porzingis world, with McCollum in place of Ricochet in that closing group. Also, this marks the first time off the bench for Zach since his second game of his career back in October 2024. And if you're new to the podcast, I will kind of lay out what I think about generally what happens here. So my stance on starting lineups forever on the podcast and my written work dating back to non-Hawk stuff, Hawk stuff, etc., is the following. I don't think starting lineups matter as much as everybody else seems to. That's my operating principle. And not every, I'm using a shorthand there, but like, for example, people like to list starting lineups and like compare them. There's more to life than the 5 guys who start the game. It matters more to me, generally speaking, who closes games. It matters more to me how much guys play than who starts. And Quinn, by the way, has said similar stuff even tonight. He was like, it doesn't really matter who starts. I kind of agree with that general sentiment. No, I'm not saying it doesn't matter at all. You don't want to start your worst player, for example, but I think that it's overblown. That's my consistent stance, pro or con. I will still share my thoughts on lineup decisions, but that's my overall thought process. Part of this is that I think McCollum is just better than Ricochet. That's not controversial in February 2026. Now, I did a segment last week on the show, or 2 weeks ago on the show, where I basically laid out like why people are being a little bit too panicky about Ricochet. In that segment, I talked about how he's not a great player, nor am I saying he's ever going to be a great player. I think part of the reaction to him is that he's got unfair expectations placed on him by a lot of people around, not necessarily with the Hawks, but like people around the internet. It's like, oh, number 1 overall pick. I'm not going to do that whole thing again, but that's part of this. I say that is like, I think I'm probably a little bit higher on Ricochet than the consensus Hawks observer right now, at least Hawks fan. And I still think it's like very obvious that McCollum is better than him as of right now. That's not controversial to say out loud. With that said, like, they were already closing with this group. The data does point to it being a positive. I have no issue at all starting McCollum. McCollum, by the way, has been a starter everywhere he's ever been, essentially. I'm sure he'd like to start. I don't know how much that has to do with this, but like, I'm sure he would like to start in his free agency season, for example. But I know the reaction is already coming about Ricochet coming off the bench, people talking about it's over for him, et cetera, et cetera. I find that very silly and very reductive. And Quinn, I think it was good of him to come out and say, hey, this is not a thing about Zach. People won't listen to that. I understand. It's also fair to say that he's not played well enough to demand his way into the lineup. Like, he's not guaranteed to start. He shouldn't be guaranteed to start. Now, he'll play. He played 20 minutes tonight, and it wasn't even particularly awesome. Like, he's going to play. I'm not worried about him not playing. It's just that, like, starting versus not starting, whatever. It's funny because in the 8 games he started since he came back from the injury in late January, he's averaging like 22 minutes a game, and he played 20 today off the bench. So, like, his role isn't going to drastically change. Who he plays with will change a little bit. I think he might be used more as a like primary defensive player, for example, than when he's playing with Dyson and Nikhil. He's the third guy of the 3 on defense for obvious reasons. If he's going to play with McCollum and, you know, Kispert, he at times today he was their best perimeter defender on the court, and he had some lineups like where he was kind of the number one guy defensively. That's reasonable to me. All that said, there's an argument that I've seen, and I don't think it's crazy, that there's mixed messaging going on here because the Hawks, and especially Ante Soleil, came out at the deadline and said, hey, you're looking at the future. I agree with that choice, but then you're turning around and putting a 34-year-old in the lineup and a 20-year-old on the bench. I think that's true to say that's kind of, those things are kind of at odds with each other. I will also say that the Hawks are trying to win basketball games. Now, the front office definitely taking a long-term view, but in the short term, they don't have their pick. They want to win games. And if you're Quinn Snyder, you are tasked with winning basketball games. So there's anything with this Hawks team this year, it's all nuanced stuff. And that's boring. I get it. But like, there's nothing clear about this team. It's not, they're not all in, they're not all out, they're not tanking, they're not rebuilding, but they're also not like pushing them for the championship. It's all very interesting, kind of nuanced, contextual stuff. This is another example of that. By the way, John Hollinger asked about Jonathan Kuminga after the game as well. Like, he could change his too. Like, would it shock me in 2 weeks if Kuminga started and McCollum didn't? No, it wouldn't. So, like, ideally, the Hawks are going to look up in a few days if Kuminga can play pretty soon and have 7 guys, the 5 guys that started today, plus Ricochet and Kuminga, who are all like going to be guaranteed to play real minutes. Plus, you have like Landale, who's the backup center, all that stuff. That's not a bad thing. I think it's like, framed sometimes it's like it's bad to have depth. It's not bad to have depth. Overall, I'll stop for now. It's a major story, obviously, today. The 5-man group with McCollum has worked. It worked today. Obviously, McCollum is better than Ricochet. They're different players. I don't think that lineups matter that much as everybody else does, but I'm okay with this. It doesn't bother me at all. Other people were like, oh, no, I wasn't upset about this at all. I think it makes reasonable sense. It's not crazy to do, nor would it be crazy, by the way, to not do it. I think that's both things are true at the same time. Kuminga will be interesting to kind of integrate shortly, but in the end, I get why it's a big deal to some, but I would just downplay the importance of it, even if I don't think it's like a crazy decision at all. Anyway, back to the game itself. I would say it's ironic that Brooklyn starts a huge lineup and they went small. Also saw this a lot. Like, now they're playing 3 small guards. Well, no, they're not. Dyson Daniels is not small. Dyson Daniels is a wing size player. Now, Nikhil is not small either. He's kind of slight. They're smaller than you probably want to be. I think ideally Dyson is not going to be playing the 3 full time, but I think that it's overblown how small they actually are because Dyson is a wing size player, like full stop, and is like a tank defensively, etc. Anyway, I thought it was actually strange that Dyson was not guarding Porter Jr. early in the game. That was kind of an odd choice that I don't think the Hawks should have made. Atlanta did lead early. I don't know if they like pulled off a little bit after that, but they did lead 13-6 the first time out. Rotationally, there was one major change beyond the starting lineup. Ricochet came in as the first sub, unsurprisingly, played a lot. Gabe Vincent played and was the first guard off the bench after 3 straight DMPs before this. He basically, they basically split the Corey Kispert, Gabe Vincent role into 2 people versus 1. It's been Kispert by himself. Now it was Kispert plus Vincent. I thought that was okay to do. I think Kispert's probably going to keep playing, but should play less. I don't know this whole thing about Friday. He's playing too much. Now he played less. That makes sense to me. But Vincent played a little bit. It was Landale. It was Mo Gay. And then Kispert didn't play until the second quarter, but did kind of hang around, generally speaking. Jalen Johnson had a nightmare sequence in the middle of the first quarter. He led a back cut for an out-of-bounds play layup. He was part of the problem in giving up a putback on the missed free throw on that same play. Then he turned it over, and then he missed a dunk. All back to back to back. It was a rough game for Jalen until the end where he was awesome. Just wanted to at least note that. The Hawks did lead by 2 points, in part because Jock Landale was hot early. He had 10 points in the first quarter. 15 his first 8 minutes for Landale in this game as the Hawks led by 8. But they had a couple of just like disaster stretches. One of them was an 11-0 run by the Nets mid-second quarter where they had a bunch of empty trips on offense. And then, look, defensively, I gave this number a little bit earlier. They were just bad for the first little while on defense. They had like a 125 defensive rating for a while. Brooklyn had 30 points in the paint in a hurry. This is actually my craziest stat from the first half. The Nets had 16 buckets at the rim in the first half on offense. That may not seem like much to you, but just for comparison's sake, the Hawks on offense average 16.6 buckets per game at the rim. And the Nets had that many in the first half. That's not going to get it done. Obviously, it got better late, but that was really, really rough. And the Nets, the one other stretch the Hawks did have well defensively was late in the first half, but it was pretty dire most of the way. Now, I'll fast forward a little bit here to get to the end. The Hawks had an 11-2 run in the third quarter, kind of take the lead a little bit, but they have a good run and they give it back. They had a good run and they give it back. Just a few different times. It was like, I couldn't believe how inconsistent they were throughout the game. And look, I noticed this on social media at the end of the third quarter that the Hawks were basically as unimpressive as possible while leading after three quarters. Well, they changed that in a hurry by not leading. They gave up a 15-2 run to begin the fourth quarter. And I have thought about this a lot. I'm not saying for sure this is the case, but it might have been their single worst stretch of the season. When you adjust for situation, fourth quarter, close game, and opponent, and the game was in Atlanta, and you're at relatively full strength, all those things, to give up that run in the fourth quarter is like, wow, that was just a disaster. It just was. Part of that was that for some reason they played Kispert, Landale, and McCollum together. I don't get that lineup at all. Fast forward, they were bad on offense, bad on defense, etc. They were down 11. Down 11 with 8 minutes to go. I will say, and Quinn said this too post-game, and he's right. It was already in my notes. Gabe Vincent might have hit the biggest shot of the game. They could not get anything to go in. Gabe Vincent was still on the court after a timeout and made a big three to make the bleeding kind of stop. And they're still down by 8, but that was a huge, huge, huge shot. That kicked off an 11-2 run to go basically get it back down to a 2-point game pretty fast. They got 3 steals. There were 2, I would say, vintage, awesome Dyson moments as a havoc creator defensively. Jalen came alive a little bit, got a run-out dunk, and was much better down the stretch. Jalen also, by the way, had a potential game-tying drive that was wiped away by an offensive foul call. It was a borderline call. The Hawks seemingly thought about challenging. Quinn was asked about it after the game by Lee Ellis, and he said that they would have been their final timeout. But Quinn basically said that they thought it was pretty clear that they wouldn't win it, which I kind of agree with. I still probably would have done it out of desperation, but I understood that choice, and they saved the timeout. Didn't matter. McCollum had a 3 to go to give them the lead. That was a big shot. The Nets kept missing every shot, basically. Jalen got downhill twice in a row to score back-to-back times, and he was really much more aggressive and much more effective late in this one. And after Jalen scored to go up by 6 with 80 seconds left, it was a 19-2 run at that point. Jalen had 9 points. It was like cooking. Out of a timeout, up 6. If you get one stop, you're probably going to win the game. And they got to stop right away. Porter Jr. missed a 3. Nikhil draws a foul. You make both to go up by 8. And at that point, you basically have to avoid a meltdown, and they did. So a lot happened in a very short period of time. McCollum hit a couple jump shots. Jalen came alive, basically was activated. And then crucially, the defense was so much better, it's like hard to describe. One more time as a recap. The Hawks were down 11 with 8 minutes to go. It was a 24-2 run after that. And here's the money stats for you. Brooklyn scored 2 points on 1 of 15 shooting with 5 turnovers in 8 minutes. 2 points. Some of that was Brooklyn just missing shots and being bad and being young and being immature. But look, the Hawks had some, even as well as they played, Brooklyn probably had 3 or 4 shots that were like wide open that just didn't go in. And that happens sometimes too. It kind of takes both teams. Dyson was unbelievable. Jalen was finally back to being Jalen. McCollum hit 2 big shots, etc. I got asked, and we'll wrap this up now, about the Nets. Like, hey, were the Nets tanking at the end? Because this has been a huge topic in the league the last couple of weeks. The Jazz, the Wizards, teams like shutting guys down. The Nets were playing their starting lineup at the end of the game. Now, I will say they're starting 2 guys in Traore and Demon who probably are not even decent NBA players right now. They're young, they're rookies, they're bad. Rookies are bad, generally speaking. If they were trying to only win, maybe they would have closed with like Terrence Mann and Day'Ron Sharpe instead. But I don't think the Nets were tanking at the end. They played. Now, were they playing well? No, they were not. But like, they're well coached. Could they have called some more timeout? I guess they could have called more timeouts or something, but I don't think that the way they operated was like tanktastic. They just are a bad basketball team. And that's what made it so egregious that the Hawks were losing the way they were, is that they were losing to a bad team. And the Nets are bad. They just are. So when the Hawks beat the Jazz at home in a very similar game a few weeks ago, when the Hawks played like crap and still won, the Jazz did sit Markkanen at the end. And that was a tanking move. Now they still try. The players always try to win. The players on the floor are trying to win, always. But in this game, that didn't happen. They could have sat Porter Jr., they didn't. So I'm not saying that's extra points for the Hawks. It's just worth noting, like context-wise, I got the question. I didn't think that was a tanktastic effort from the Nets. They just aren't a very good team. And the Hawks finally just decided, basically with 8 minutes to go, hey, we're not losing. My good friend Tyler Jones said that on I think it was on Blue Sky, was like, hey, Dyson just decided they're not going to lose. It's true. Dyson, CJ, and Jalen were like, we're not losing this game. And they didn't. So there you go. All right. In a second, I'll dive into the player-by-player evaluations from this contest and more. It's coming up in just one moment. Have you ever experienced the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel's giving that chance right now to make the dream a reality with their NBA sweepstakes, and here is how it works. Use a profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll be automatically entered for a shot to win a trip for two to the NBA Finals this year. That's right, flights, tickets, the whole experience from FanDuel. If you're already looking at the board this season and trying to figure out who's going to win, which teams make the actual run to the end this year, it's perfect time right now to go ahead and lock it in. Futures are already great. Picking a team to win the conference or win the championship, it adds an extra layer of excitement to every single game down the stretch. And now, not only can the future bets actually win for you, they can send you to the NBA Finals as well. Plus, they still have a full slate of offerings of other sports at FanDuel beyond basketball. When it comes to like college hoops, for example, they have baseball, football, hockey, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, boxing, MMA, and so much more. Plus, at FanDuel, they have all kinds of angles you can imagine: point spreads, over-unders, money lines, player props, game props, live betting, parlays, and so much more. And the place to go is FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost right now on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win and trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Tax season does not have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert from start to finish without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out the forms, you can actually meet with a local TurboTax expert who's local to you, and you can do it in person or online. They know everything from W-2s to 1099s and more, and they work to get you every single deduction. You can upload your documents, go about the rest of your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a massive time saver. It gives you a huge peace of mind right now, knowing that an expert is going to handle it all for you. And for a limited time, you get your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150. $150, all in if that TurboTax expert does not file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local. That's TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, and playing to discuss when it comes to the player evaluations in this game, 10 guys appeared for Atlanta. The only active players who did not play were Buddy Hield, Asa Newell, and Keaton Wallace. I do think, or at least wonder aloud, if they might send Asa to College Park sometime soon to just have him play if he's not going to play in the rotation, but TBD on that. Gabe Vincent, back in the rotation today, 11 minutes, hit a big shot in the fourth quarter, 3 points, 3 assists, a rebound, a steal. He was fine. I don't think he was great. Kind of a steady hand. Gabe does not shoot a lot. He's not a huge on-ball player, offensive creator, but he does defend pretty well, much better than like Kispert, for example. Just a reliable backup guard type. Not great by any means, but like someone you can play to stabilize things. I think we pretty much did that in this game. Mo Gay, 10 minutes off the bench. The Hawks were actually +3 in his minutes, but he didn't score an assist, had a steal. I thought Mo was fine. He missed his only 3-point attempt, was pretty good defensively, as he often is. And I think he still just generally makes more sense with Landale than Asa does, which isn't like Asa's fault. It's just kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to rotations on this team. Corey Kispert, interestingly enough, shot well in this game. He had 9 points on 5 shots. Unfortunately, he just didn't do anything else, and I thought was pretty bad, even with the shot making. So Kispert was -16 in 13 minutes, and that was kind of earned. I think defensively, it just doesn't work right now with him, especially when you're going to pair him. This is not his fault. If you're going to pair him with McCollum and Landale, it's just not going to work, I don't think. But give and take, on one hand, it's like, man, he was still this kind of dire, even with some good shot making. On the other, I think he will play better than this on the whole, but there's some choices to make. I got questions today like, hey, what happens when Kuminga comes back? If it's me, I'm playing Kuminga and Richiche, and I'm not playing Kispert, personally. But we'll see how this goes when that comes to to pass. The star on the bench today was Landale, 17 points, 6 rebounds in 16 minutes, hit all 3 of his threes. Very reminiscent of that Utah game when he was just on fire in the first half. I don't think he played as well as those numbers indicate, but I think he at least was a positive as far as shot making is concerned, offensive rebounding, etc. Defensively, it's not great, but I thought he gave him a lift when they kind of needed it in the first half. And then Richeche, 7 points in 20 minutes. He was, I think he was 2 of 4 on twos, 1 of 3 on threes. Had a steal, a couple turnovers, a couple of one thing he's definitely struggling at right now, right in a big way, is like his drive finishing, like especially in transition. He's had a couple chances in the last couple games to like get all the way to the rim with a relatively transition spaced floor. It just hasn't been able to finish those at the rim. He started the game pretty well offensively and then cooled off. I don't think he was bad. I think defensively he was pretty locked in for the most part, but offensively not potent. And then did not play all in the fourth quarter when they kind of got out of whack and had to lean heavily on the starting 5 in this game. Speaking of those 5, McCollum, 16 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 turnovers in the game. Didn't have a great shooting game, was only 2 of 5 on twos, 3 of 7 on threes. But hit 2 big shots down the stretch and was plus 26 in the game. Speaks for itself. It's actually been crazy. I don't think he's playing as well as this indicates. He's been like a plus-minus darling in Atlanta. I think it's a relatively small sample size, but like they have been much better with him on the court than off, not even close. Nikhil, 17 points, 6 assists, 3 rebounds, and 2 steals, plus 29. Only 1 of 3 on twos, but 3 of 9 from 3. I thought he played fine. He was a little bit shaky in the first half, to say the least, but was better as the game wore on, like most guys were on the Hawks. Okongwu, 13 points, 11 rebounds, 2 block shots, was generally good. First half, like everybody else, defensively just kind of a step slow, but once he kind of figured it out, it was better, and he was plus 17 in an 11-point win, so there's that. Dyson, I thought, was like remarkably good for someone who can't make a shot. 7 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals. Like a very Dyson line. He did miss both of his threes, unsurprisingly. Missed at least one more floater that was probably makeable, but it was 3 of 8 from the floor. I thought he, especially in the fourth, was just like completely dominant defensively. Before that, he was kind of a normal Dyson game, but this is kind of a epitome Dyson game this season, like just checking all the boxes other than shooting. And that's, if you're someone who just believes that a guy can't be good without shooting, I get it, but he's been, I would say, rebuffing that throughout the season. Jalen Johnson, I alluded to this earlier, but it's kind of funny to me that he ends up with 26 and 12. He was pretty bad for a lot of this game, but he was great late. He really was. He got downhill a bunch of times, had 3 or 4 of the biggest shots of the game as the run was happening in the fourth quarter. Was 11 of 19 on twos, 0 of 3 from 3. Man, he's not getting a lot of foul calls in recent days. I'm not trying to be that guy. I don't like to talk about officiating a lot, but I think he's not gotten the benefit of the whistle the last week or two. Still, like, he has a tendency to kind of float on some finishes, which is part of the reason for that, but I still think he was not given a lot of leeway there. But 4 turnovers, like, just wasn't a super crisp game. I think he was kind of floating a little bit in the way he tends to do at times. But once he locked in, it was good at the end, which is what matters. And he was still plus 8 in the game and all that stuff. So 38 minutes for Jalen, and he's still playing at an all-star level on a nightly basis. So I know there was a lot to get to on this podcast between the game itself, a crazy comeback, the lineup change, etc. I tried to cover a lot of that. I will hopefully have other non-game shows this week because there's only 3 games on the schedule. So please stay tuned for all of that. And please subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on Twitter/X, Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow me on Blue Sky at BT Rowland if you want to. And then also my non-podcast coverage of the Hawks can be found at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Everybody, the Hawks are back in action on Tuesday evening against the Washington Wizards at home. I'll be in the building, so please stay tuned. We'll have a show at the very latest after that. And please subscribe, tell your friends. We'll see you all next time.